early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
With rising costs and the search for meaningful employment, I want to assure you that your voices are heard. As your president, I assure you that we are committed to finding sustainable solutions to alleviate the suffering of our citizens. Once again, I plead for your patience as the reforms we are implementing show positive signs, and we are beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel. Exactly 64 years ago, our founding fathers chose democracy as a form of government and launched the dream of a great country that would lead the rest of Africa out of poverty, ignorance, and underdevelopment. A beacon of hope for the rest of Africa and the world. Over 6 decades later, we can look back and Nigerians worldwide can see how well we have succeeded in realizing the lofty dream of our founding fathers. The world is witnessing and benefiting from the can-do spirit of Nigerian people, our massive intellectual capacity, and our enterprise and industry in all vocations, from art to science, technology to infrastructure. The dreams that our founding fathers envisaged are still work in progress. Every day, we put our hands on the plow, determined to do a better job of it. While it is tempting to focus on what has been left undone and where we have stumbled as a nation, we must never lose sight of how far we have come in forging and holding our country together. Since independence, our nation has survived many crises and upheavals that led to the dissolution and disintegration of many other nations worldwide. 6 years after independence, our country descended into a political crisis that led to a bitter and unavoidable civil war. Since returning from the brink of that darkest moment, we have learned to embrace our diversity and manage our differences better as we continue to work towards engendering a more perfect union.
All right, that was an extract of President Tinubu's national broadcast to the nation yesterday on October 1st, when Nigeria clocked 64. Well, you'll be saying, okay, the celebration was yesterday, but we can't stop talking about Nigeria. We need to talk about our nation, to look at the state of the nation, and specifically to look at the highlights of these broadcasts, where the president sees the opportunity to reel out some of his economic reforms, the steps being taken to make Nigeria a better place. And that's going to be the thrust of our conversation today. Joining us for this conversation, we have Orji Chigozie Udumezue, who is the managing consultant, CEO of Flame Academy Consulting Ltd. Orji, glad you have you join us this morning. Good to see you again.
Yeah, good morning, my very good friend. How is Lagos? I hope you guys are doing well. I'm sending you greetings from the city on 1,000 hills, Kigali in Rwanda. It's always my pleasure to be on your
Glad to know you're
Thank
reaching
you.
us from Kigali. Lagos is fine. We're doing great. We're making progress. And as you know, we always get bigger and better. All
Yeah,
right.
sure.
Now let's get to the conversation. Nigeria clocked 64 yesterday. We're still talking about Nigeria, looking at the independence anniversary. Now, let's start by looking at the mixed feelings among Nigerians. There are people who argued, okay, Nigeria, we need to celebrate. There are some who feel it's not a time for celebration. It's time for a sober reflection. It's a time to reflect on the journey so far. Let me start with this by you giving us a picture of what you think Nigeria seeks for. Do you think it's time to celebrate, or it's time to reflect? Or what's your perspective now that Nigeria is celebrating its 61st independence anniversary?
Okay, Femi, in my view, you know, I don't know how to paint things, and I believe that if we have love for country, we should always speak the truth to ourselves, because the worst thing that can happen to any being, any entity, is for that being to keep lying to itself on a continual basis. That's a recipe for danger and problems. There is nothing to celebrate in Nigeria of today. Absolutely nothing, in my view. So our independence yesterday is not just a time of sober reflection. It should be a time of sincere mourning of our failures over the years. A child of 64 years, or a nation that have lived for 64 years, and you look at what's going on today, and you feel like we are just a failed nation, or you can say a failing nation, in which if nothing urgent is done to rescue this nation, we can as well be a bygone. Something needs to be done urgently, beginning with our political economy. Nigeria at 64 is still playing bad politics, politics of exclusion, politics of winner takes all, politics of thuggery. And the three levels of government are totally broken. Nigerian voices cannot be heard, you know, when they want to elect their leaders. Political thugs and, money bags, have their ways. Whatever the people say, whether it's from Ekiti to Edo to Nigeria as a whole, people vote and they believe that what they voted for was not counted. And then even now that we use IRF for more transparency, you see IRF reports being mutilated and nothing is done about it. That's a very horrible level to be as a nation. So, and as the politics is broken, our economy is also broken, because politics brings about economics. The leaders that are elected or appointed or selected or whatever you call them, end up bringing up people, from their political team and, and their groups and all of that to run the economy. And when they don't have sincere, selfless intentions, the economy suffers and everybody's, suffering the consequences. Unemployment, Nigerians are hugely unemployed, even though you might look at the data by National Bureau of Statistics and feel like things are okay. But there's a high level of unemployment and underemployment in this country, 64 years after. Our economic prosperity is not getting any better. Nigeria is getting poorer and poorer. By GDP size, even though it was our GDP was reviewed in 2014 to about $509 billion by Konji to reflect recent or current prices, due to rebasing. From 509 billion in about 10 years ago, we are back to less than 300 billion. From being, in 2014, the biggest economy in Africa, we are now about the fourth economy in Africa. 64 years after, our currency has very badly depreciated against the dollar to the point that people don't even earn up to, $100 in a month in basic salary. In fact, not even up to $50. Even master's degree holders and so on. So what is there to celebrate? If you're talking about export-import dynamics, while we continue to produce oil over the years, the oil has become a cost to this nation, the Dutch disease. Is it diversity that we said, oh, the president has said we are unified and diversity? How can you say that in a nation where a particular people are excluded from political positions? And the body language is clear that these people can never come near to the presidency or things like that. How do you want to build a nation like that? How do you say that we are doing well when a particular party wins election and all the other parties are suppressed and there's no possible opposition in the country? A healthy democracy, is very eager to hear the voice of opposition and hear them. And in the speech, the country is planning a youth conference so that the voice of the youth will be heard. To what means? To what end? You gather people together, they discuss and bring out all kinds of ideas, and which are just kept under the carpet. The Orji report was celebrated even on this platform. I remember you interviewed me on that some months ago when the president now said, we're going to dust up that report and see how to cut down the size of government. And it's still not done today, and it may never be done in these 4 years of this government. So why do we keep deceiving ourselves as a nation? I'm actually very angry at Nigeria because Nigeria has the potential to lead not just Africa, but the whole of the black nations, and in fact, become a very big force to reckon with in the global arena. We have the potentials. Nigerians have great intellectual capacity all over the world. They are doing great in every sector, aviation, education, whatever, business, commerce, all around the world. In medical sector, Nigerians have great doctors in Europe, in America, doing great work. So how come we come into Nigeria, nothing is working? It's really a sad moment for Nigeria. In fact, every independence, for me, is a sad moment for this country until we step back and begin, first of all, to allow people elect their leaders and then allow them hold those leaders accountable to their performance. Maybe I can stop at this point, as we continue.
All right. I understand why you're angry and you have to acknowledge that, but what I want us to do is the anger now, I want us to channel it towards talking about the right policies and the right suggestions for our nation to be better. And I think that would be the best way to channel it. There are those who will acknowledge that we can't say nothing is working in Nigeria 64 years after. There are certain things that could be working, except that we're expecting more. We acknowledge that. But let's look at the national broadcast that the president had yesterday. Now, it started by showing what you call empathy to Nigerians, to acknowledge the fact that he's aware of the fact that Nigerians are going through difficult times, looking at the state of the economy, the cost of living. And let me quote the president here. He said something quite important. He said, "I want to assure you that your voices are heard. We're beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel." I want you to react to that. The president acknowledged the fact that the voices of Nigerians are being heard. And he's saying that we're beginning to see the light after the tunnel. How do you react to that?
The voices of Nigerians are being heard and ignored. They are not being heard to any purposeful end. That's to be frank with you. And you said they are showing empathy to the fate of the people. I refuse to believe all of these words. They are only words meant for a prepared speech by the president. But where are the actions backing them up? Where are the actions? In the midst of petrol subsidy removal and high cost of things, where has government cut down their frivolous expenses and tried to help the life of people in all the local governments in this country? Where are the buses and other means of transportation that can alleviate the pains of the working class, whose salaries cannot even take them to and fro work? Where is the adjustment in the parliament and the executive government, reducing the size of government and so on, to be able to provide palliatives and a better option for Nigerians to be able to go to work and come back? Where is our minimum wage today at 70,000 when we cannot afford one bag of rice? Meanwhile, at the presidential level, we are spending billions and billions, 25 billion to do a renovation or a building. For who to live in? For God to live in that building? So these are mere words. They are not showing up in the behavior and daily spending of this government. At a point, too, the president mentioned, if we don't do something different, from the usual thing, we will end up, in the dustbin. And that's exactly what we're doing. This government is continuing business as usual. And expected by now, something drastic must have been done to cut down the size of government as a first show of empathy and love for Nigerians. This government is borrowing every single day to carry out white elephant projects. So where is the empathy? Where is the understanding of people's plight? And today, as Dangote is struggling to see how he can, refine oil in Nigeria and, employ labor and all of that, and we cut down the amount of dollar we use to import petroleum products, the obstacle on the way of that company is very huge. So where is the empathy? And then, in as much as I commend the reforms that were started early in the year to stabilize the price of naira and, both in the parallel market and the official market, for the dollar. Today, that policy has been reversed with the RDAS. Official rate will be at 1,550, while parallel market is still at 1,700 or so, creating another huge gap for round tripping and fraud going on in the central bank and all the racketeering going on around them. So policy inconsistency. Where is the focus? To stay the course, go through some pain for a while, and then begin to see the light at the end of the tunnel. There's no light at the end of the tunnel. Despite the president claiming that foreign direct investment is coming in and all of that, it's false. It's false. There's no impact on our nation. If we are attracting foreign direct investment, foreign portfolio investment, by now we would have had more FX liquidity, dollar liquidity, costing us less pain in the naira dollar exchange rate. So these are quoted words to make us feel nice, but they're not nice at all. If we have time, we can go through the highlights of this speech one by one, and I'll tell you my views. We need to have a president who will gather around him people that have very sincere, honest, and selfless attitude towards leadership in this country. Not those who are willing to cooperate and not disagree and then be busy eating this country dry and bringing things down. I am actually totally disappointed at the APC government of this regime, because we believe that the Tinubu we had in Lagos was transformational in nature. So what has happened to Tinubu in Abuja, in Nigeria? We still pray God to guide him and give him wisdom to be able to steer the course of this nation in a better way. Otherwise, what I still see is plain politics. And you come to the political arena, like the recent Edo election, people felt that, because the president is APC, they must get it by all means, hook and crook. With all due respect to the election result announced by the NEC. But when people feel that the system is hugely flawed and fraudulent, then there's something to be concerned about. The best way to move forward in this country is, first of all, to allow people's voice to come to effect when elections are done. That's the first true step to nation building. And then to allow people, have their way at the electoral, to elect the right people. That's the beginning of our problem in Africa. And then when we now elect people, allow, the masses, hold them to account in the way they behave and do things. Why has NNPC remained opaque in the activities and nothing has been done? So where is the empathy? I don't know if you can still hear me. It looks like my network is unstable. Can you hear me?
I'm right here with you. You've made your point. Now let's talk about the high cost of living in Nigeria, which also the president talked about. You're aware that the high cost of living is occasioned by the hike in the prices of goods and services, complemented by, the cost of transport and elsewhere. You're aware of the decision made by the president, which has to do with the removal of first subsidy, and which has also led to what is happening in the transport sector and even in the oil and gas sector, and could also be attracted to the ripple effect of what is playing out as regards hike in the prices of goods and services. Now, like I said earlier, our anger, I want us to channel it towards how we can advise the present administrations on how to do things better. So on the cost of living, as an expert who has been training people in the course of this kind of development, what would be your recommendations, let's say on the short term, medium and long term, to also help the cost of living for Nigerians? You have hunger in the land, and it's often said someone who is angry has a tendency to, who is hungry has a tendency to be angry. So I can understand when people are angry, but what can the president do? What would you expect this present administration to do to alleviate the sufferings in terms of high costs of living? Let's break it down in short term, medium, and long term. Your take.
Okay, when you talk about the cost of living, being very high, inflation, and its factors, you have to look at the key sources of inflation in Nigeria. One, food inflation. Before we now talk about the cost of transportation that now runs through every other sector. Cost of energy in productivity, in production, in factories, cost of transportation, taking people up and down, even where the farmer, brings out the goods in the farm to move it from one place to the other, has a very high cost. All of that building into the high cost of living we are, seeing today. Apart from the fact that the Russian invasion of Ukraine, caused a very high spike in energy costs and so on coming out to Nigeria. So on the immediate term, let the president hold the security architecture of this country accountable. Yes, they said they have decimated a number of Boko Haram, but the number they called is so little compared to the amount of incidents we have in this country. So that farmers everywhere in Nigeria, in the middle belt, northeast or northwest and southeast, can go to their farms and make, produce things freely. Even the fear of, herdsmen is pervaded everywhere in the country, southeast, south, and everywhere. When that problem can, be solved with ranches and other ways to minimize these conflicts. So as long as farmers are not free to enter their farm due to bandits and so on, meanwhile, God has blessed us with very good weather and so on, the food inflation component will continue to be very high. Even though with the rainy season now and a few crop being brought out fresh in the market, we have seen some reduction in those costs. But that will come back again when we go back to the dry season. Having said that, on the energy side, Nigeria produces crude oil. And if we are very true to ourselves, even when we have to export this crude, what do we do with the funds that we get from there? If we export crude and make a good revenue without spending carelessly, we can use that fund to develop other sectors, that infrastructure and so on, that will bring prices down in this country. Okay, now, when we have to import the crude, we are importing at a very high price because the dollar is not available. We are exporting only crude oil, and we're now importing both refined petroleum and several other things, almost every other thing in this country. So how do we, in the medium term, reduce our dollar demand for imports? So number one is, on the immediate term too, let this government break the monopoly of NNPC and see that our 4 refineries are working to support Dangote refinery to ensure that there is a free flow of refined petroleum product in this country at the best price possible. So that with that, the cost of transportation will come down reasonably. And even while the subsidy is removed, which is not bad in itself, government should find a quick way to channel some fiscal funds, some budget allocations into supporting public movement. We have 774 local governments in this country. We can position a number of buses in each local government as mass transit to support farmers' movement, workers, and so on, to reduce the high cost of things. These are practical things that can be done. Then, very importantly, in the medium to long term, how can we diversify our export earnings such that we will be able to earn more dollars while cutting off dollar consumption through petroleum product, which is almost like 40% of our dollar consumption? That alone can even, create a very quick drop in prices of things in this country. Because Nigeria's inflation is not demand pull. People are not getting richer, getting more jobs, demanding for more goods and services in the market. Our inflation is basically caused by high cost of prices, input materials, and even finished goods being imported into this country. So we are suffering from imported inflation. So how do we substitute import for our local production, local produce? How do we produce more things that we need? How do we not import rice, import plantain, and other things that we have in abundance in this country? Meanwhile, we produce them somewhere, and then they come out from the farm. The farmer cannot move it around, cannot process them, he cannot preserve them, and they spoil all over the country. How do we promote post-harvest technology? Being able to process our cassava, our yam, and other things into some other high-level products. And by doing that, we create employment in this country, and we're able to feed our nation and export other, value chains, well-structured, well-packaged, and all of that, meeting European standard and so on. So we can earn more dollars and be able to have enough dollars for our imports, whereby our currency will begin to gain more value. But for as long as we have dollar scarcity, getting dollar only through oil export, while we import everything else, this high cost of things will continue. So how does the government encourage the states to become very productive in every resource, natural resource that they're very rich in. So we can have more export going on. Some time ago, we heard about vegetables being exported in Anambra State, and so much dollar coming in with that. We can replicate that in all the states in this country. And by the time we have so much dollar flowing in, and of course, with security being improved, we have more investors coming in. And by the time the prices stabilize, we have other, means of, IMTOs, foreign exchange flowing in. Then these things will abate. So government needs to look away from oil and focus more on non-oil export, not just paying lip service to it. Can we get the fiscal authorities devoted towards bringing down the demand for dollar in this country? I mean, moving more dollars.
You were almost answering my next question, but it wouldn't stop us from still talking about foreign direct investment. It was one of the things the president highlighted yesterday, that so far Nigeria has been able to gather FDI worth about $30 billion. And the president has said in this light, is showing that he's more committed to ensuring that Nigeria will be able to attract more FDI. Now, I put it to you, which you almost started, but I still want you to expand it further. Now, for Nigeria, so far, Nigeria has been able to attract $30 billion. That looks appreciable, but what do you think we need to do to sustain this momentum to attract more FDI to Nigeria and to make it a place where foreign investors will always be Nigeria will always be what you call go-to for foreign investors?
Okay, very basic. Foreign direct investors are coming in to invest on a long-term basis in your economy, where they see opportunities. And in Nigeria, there are so many opportunities, whether it's in tourism, in medical services, in education, in agriculture, very important. But for these guys to come in, you have to have stability of government policies, taxation, and all of that. For them to come in, you have to be able to provide some basic amenities, power, infrastructure. And you know that we are nowhere to go when you talk about power. As I speak to you, I'm not a generator in Kigali. I am 24 hours on electricity supply. It could trip off for a minute or two and it comes back. Nigeria is still, grappling with 4,000 megawatts of energy. So for a foreign investor to come into Nigeria, he has to come in with his own generating system for power and all of that. Yes, we have a low cost of labor. A Nigerian worker can work for you 24 hours, non-stop, under $100 a month. That's a positive one. But there's no security, there's no energy, there's no stability of government policy, and so on. So foreign direct investors may not be able to come in the way we expected. In fact, in the oil and gas sector, because of the lower emphasis now on fossil fuel, we can see IOCs, international oil companies, divesting away from Nigeria, particularly in the shallow water drilling and land operations. We're in the process of getting, already Oando has bought over the assets of SOUQ, Nigerian Oil Company, and Mobil is also on their own process now. So that is a divestment, that's movement out of country of foreign direct investors. But that's not to worry about. I believe that like Oando and other players, they have enough experience to take over that sector. After all, we cannot continue to be boy, for years in that sector. But as these people divest and pull away direct investment, how do we attract more appropriate direct investment in other important sectors, non-oil, sectors, solid minerals, mining, agricultural investment? We cannot afford to produce granite and send it away raw. Then somebody will now just do a small processing and they call it peanut butter, and then we're buying it, at the price of times 100 of it. Why don't we, attract investment in agro-processing, whereby we can produce our cassava and turn it to different kinds of things, cassava flake, cassava this and that, paint it with some flour and sugar and all of that, and call it different things, package them for international standard and export them. Doing that, we create so much job here, expand our economy, approaching our GDP desire of $1 trillion and so on. That cannot happen until we attract both domestic and foreign direct investment, not portfolio investment. That, for now, government is still trying to push monetary policy to manage inflation, which is for me a waste of time. You and I have discussed on this platform how even IMF has acknowledged that Nigeria's monetary policies do not address issues concerning inflation here. And there we were a week ago, central bank met again and then further tightened monetary policy. They moved the CRR to 50%. Who does that? Making cost of fund and lending in this country, in Nigeria, much more uncompatible to simple economic agents in this country. Of course, NPR was also moved by 50 basis points, making funding, access to fund in Nigeria very difficult for investors. So domestic investors are dying. Foreign investors are not coming due to insecurity and so on. So where does that leave us? There's really need for us to rethink our fiscal and monetary policies to become more evidence-based. Thank you.
All right, let me do a follow-up on what you just said now, talking about monetary policy. You talked about the decision made by the CBN to tighten the benchmark interest rate as regards controlling inflation. What would you have expected the CBN to have done? Because what informs the decision to reduce rate, benchmark rate, is when the inflation figure is getting better. But here in Nigeria, if you look at the reality of the annual inflation rate in Nigeria, that couldn't have given the CBN the boldness or the courage to cut interest rate like every other nations have been doing, like that of the US. Don't you think what the CBN did was just in a way to ensure that there's economic stability, given the fact that the figure recorded as regards the inflation is still a double digit and might not encourage an apex man like the CBN to cut interest rate? Don't you think the CBN had no choice but to increase interest rate?
The best the central bank could have done in the circumstances that we are here right now, if not for ego, is to hold the rates. For me, really, the rates are no more significant at this point. They don't, whether you cut them or you reduce them, there's no much significance in the system. It's all about foreign exchange. Even when they're cutting the rate, they're trying to curtail the banking sector's ability to hold foreign currency. They want the currency to be released so that people can buy things and so on. So that is just because we have no other alternative to FX availability. Ideally, while this is going on, I've told you that in my view, the Central Bank of Nigeria has once again come to the monetary policy exhaustion level. But just for the sake of keeping busy and doing something, they try to say, oh, to further contain inflation, let's tighten rates. However, even in the past 2 months, August, September, and so on, the report has shown that inflation has not gone any further, month on month. It has somehow abated, even though year on year, it might still look very horrible. So that is enough to even allow them hold the rate while they watch more the inflation trend. But as long as the Naira-dollar exchange rate is getting worse in the parallel market, inflation will continue to go on in this country. That's my view, because our inflation is not demand pull. The standard economic theory is that when there's so much money in circulation, people are earning more salaries, more money is available, FAC allocation is released and all of that, people tend to go and buy more goods and services. And then as they're doing that, too much money is pursuing too few goods, causing inflation. But in the case of Nigeria, really, the demand when people have money in their pocket, particularly the high-wired money from FAC allocation and so on, is the demand for dollar, which we don't have in this country. And that's why it's very imperative, even though it's a fiscal lever in economic management, but for us to get inflation to abate, it cannot happen with continued fiscal tightening, monetary tightening. That's wrong priority. Let there be a strong handshake between the monetary authority, central bank, and fiscal authorities to see how they can galvanize their effort to cut down our demand for FX. First of all, by removing petroleum products, refined petroleum products from our import baskets. They remove that. Then how do they now ensure that we have stability of rates enough to attract foreign portfolio investors that will bring in FX? How do they now promote funding of non-oil, exports, funding of, solid minerals and so on, removing the opacity in that sector, so that more dollar will flow in, and then we have it easy to import things, which will also help us manage inflation. So at the end of the day, we are not sitting down to look at the real cause of our problems. So that's my take on that.
Well said now. We're not done yet, but it's time for us to go on a short break. We still have Orji here looking at the highlights of President Tinubu's national broadcast yesterday. We'll be right back shortly to discuss further. This will be an opportunity for us to take reactions from Nigeria as regards the independence. Nigeria celebrating 61st independence anniversary. We'll be right back to discuss more with our guests. Stay with us.
We have a lot to talk about Nigeria. So 64 years after, and I look back, I feel ashamed. There was a time in this country, even as a student, once you have admission, even from passing out from your secondary school, you get automatic employment. 3-4 companies coming to employ you. Today, what happens, even with your degree, with your first class and everything? Nothing works.
No, wetin we wan celebrate, nothing we go celebrate you. School fees, everything don high. Food, no, we don't even eat 3 times daily again, 2 times. 3 square meals is hard to eat.
Oh yeah, we are getting to have youths determine their destinies for themselves, not depending on the country.
I'm a public commentator, and I have to tell you the fact as it is. We aren't expecting anything better, even at 64. Nigeria has gone from grace to grass. Nigeria has gone from when we used to celebrate being a Nigerian to now not even trying to mention the name I'm a Nigerian anywhere before the international community. And it's so sad. I must tell you the truth. It's so sad because when you look at the economy today, what do we get?
Governance, they should have empathy for the masses.
What we are expecting is they should reduce everything. Food, school fees, everything. Transportation, fuel, gas. Na charcoal we dey use now.
Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
All right, what an interesting, narrative there you had. You heard Nigerians pouring out their hearts, feelings as regards Nigeria 64. Some are saying, oh, it's not time to celebrate. Talking about the unemployment, you heard that man talked about the era where there was automatic employment. Anyway, let's see what Orji will have to say as regards this reaction from Nigerians. Orji, glad to know you're still there with us.
Okay, yeah,
thanks now, but let's wrap up by taking some insight from what Nigerians said as regards the issue of unemployment. You heard that man talked about a time in Nigeria where an average graduate qualifies for automatic employment. Now, if you look at the rate of unemployment in Nigeria, the figure is not just palatable. Now, quickly, I would like you to highlight some of the things you would expect the federal government to do to tackle the issue of unemployment, and also for public servants. Do you think the minimum wage will make any impact? And what would you expect also to tackle for the federal government to tackle the issue of hunger? You heard that lady talking about the issue of people not being able to afford to eat, which is very prevalent in the land. So quickly, I would like you to summarize by talking about the issue of unemployment and also tackling hunger in Nigeria as a way to wrap up your thought.
Of course, when people are employed and there's a high level of employment of resources in the country, people's welfare, people's earnings, grow, and they will move away from hunger. So the whole idea of economic management, everything we've been discussing here from the beginning of this show up till now, is to create economic prosperity and inclusive growth. And when that happens, hunger will go on. We go down. So how does this government work towards creating employment? It's a known fact that everywhere in the world, the only way to create jobs in a nation is to empower the private sector to be able to operate, easily, make business opening very easy, create enabling environment for businesses to thrive, so that, every entrepreneur can pick up one or two people, into their team, and then, as they grow too, they employ more people. Government can never provide employment for the masses, and that has been a wrong approach we are applying in this country in the past, trying to do everything by government, and therefore you have now packed in public sector people who are redundant and doing nothing, and creating obstacles for economic growth. So how do we ensure that businesses thrive in this country, entrepreneurship and so on? We have tried unbundling NEPA to private companies today. How well are they doing? How is government providing electricity for companies to thrive? What are the other infrastructure, railways and so on, to enable businesses, move freely, harness their resources towards, growing? Nigerian businesses are dying every single day. They don't have energy supply and so on. And now again, they can't even access cheap loan. Some of us, we want to raise money in the economy. You take money at 10% per month. That's the 120%, per annum. That's a recipe for danger and failure. So as long as we are not rolling out policies, that will encourage entrepreneurial growth and entrepreneurship and so on, enabling small businesses to grow. Most small businesses in Nigeria are failing. People have great ideas, but they don't have the capital to make it thrive. When they start with the capital that they have, it's eaten up by high cost of doing business. And of course, multiple taxation and so on. So at the end of the day, if the economy is structured to stifle businesses' growth, you find that unemployment would be the only result. And hunger and poverty will join with that. So let this government calm down. It's not just about holding a youth conference for 30 days that will say, oh, let's hear your voice. What policies are you doing to ensure that every young person that has a business can thrive, can have access to government grants or at least cheap loan in the commercial banking sector? And of course, we'll be able to start his business and have power supply throughout the whole day, whether it's an online business or a physical business. Nigeria is structured to fail in entrepreneurship. Let this government look at how to move us from 4,000 megawatts to more than 20,000 megawatts in the next 1 year, where we have constant power supply, another enabling environment, roads and other things. You can see people's ideas thriving. After all, outside Nigeria, Nigerians are doing great businesses outside the country, and they are thriving. Let's give the right of way, the right of access, to fund and so on, to Nigerian businesses to thrive. That's the only way we can solve unemployment.
All right, what a way to wrap up this conversation, giving those sound bites and call to actions. Let's hope that the issue of unemployment will be a thing of the past. We must thank you. I learned you have to go now because of your busy schedule and to attend to other things. Thank you so much for your time and sharing your thoughts with us on LX Thing this morning.
You're welcome. Always my pleasure to be with you guys. Do have a great day. And I need to run back to class quickly to continue building Africa the way we know how to do. Thanks so much.
All right, that's a patriotic thing to do, Orji. Keep the flag flying and keep making Nigerian proud in Kigali.
Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.